ahead and get started. Welcome to Coffee at 10. Looks like everybody found some coffee, found some goodies. Melissa, we good online? Hello on Zoom and Facebook. Welcome to Coffee at 10. So we were talking yet again this morning, trying to figure out if we could find out how long we've been doing Coffee at 10, but we don't know. It's been a long time. We're really excited to be able to continue to bring this program to our audiences here in Northern Michigan and throughout the area. Coffee at 10 is available in person here in Petoskey as well as Traverse City. And then we also live stream via Zoom webinar if you want to be part of the conversation there, or tune in on Facebook. You can hear what our guests have to say and be part of the conversation that way. Coffee at 10 is made possible thanks to Crooked Tree Art Center members. So if you are a member, thank you so much for your continued support and for allowing us to bring this kind of programming to our community. If you're not yet a member or want to know more, you can see Bobby at the front desk and he can answer your questions and let you know all about that. We also need to thank a Roast and Toast, our sponsors. So if you haven't yet grabbed your cup of coffee, we've got coffee and pastries outside. I'm sure there'll be some extras at the end of our presentation today as well. So a big thank you to Roast and Toast for making that possible. And I just want to welcome you to our second Coffee at 10 of the series. For Coffee at 10, we bring in guests near and far to talk about their own creative work. Sometimes our conversations line very closely with the exhibits that we have on display, and other times they're opportunities to connect with themes, ideas, projects that are happening in our community at large. This week, we get to partner once again with one of our favorite collaborators, Good Heart Artist Residency. Good Heart Artist Residency has been working for just about 10 years. They're coming up on their, well, this is their anniversary year. 10 years of bringing artists from across the United States to Good Heart, Michigan, so that our artists can spend time in a beautiful space away from all of the immediate demands of normal life and get a chance to sink into creative thinking and creative practice. This kind of work is really important. And one of the things that is most impressive and impactful and important to me about the work that Good Heart Artist Residency is doing is they are connecting the creativity that happens in our beautiful region of the world, this tiny little spot in Northern Michigan, with themes and ideas and important practices that are happening near and far. So it's really a treat that these artists get to be up here, and I'm really thrilled to be able to partner with them to highlight our artists. That's another thing that I want to just plug right now is that Good Heart Artist Residency and Crooked Tree Art Center are partnering on an exhibition this fall. That exhibition is titled Art, Place, and Community, which is really the mission and themes that are relevant to Good Heart Artist Residency. We have invited all past alumni artists to exhibit here in our Bonfield and Gilbert galleries. That show's going to open September 16th, and it'll really give you an opportunity to see the broad range of work that Good Heart Artist Residency is involved with. Artists who are visual artists, writers, composers. It's really pretty impressive. So with that, I want to introduce our guest today. We are very fortunate to have current artist in resident Tylonn Sawyer here with us to tell us more about his work. Tylonn was born and raised in Detroit. He has been included in solo and group exhibitions throughout the US and abroad, including the Venice Biennale. He's been exhibited at Texas A&M, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, the Detroit Institute of Art, Heron Arts in San Francisco, and the list goes on. Sawyer holds an MFA in painting from the New York Academy of Art and has a BFA from Eastern Michigan and is currently in Detroit. So it's really a unique opportunity that Tylonn is here with us today. Really thrilled to hear more. So we'll listen and discover some about this work, and then there'll be some time for Q&A at the end. So please join me in welcoming Tylonn.
Thank you, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. Liz, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Sue, thank you so much for the residency. It's just, this is my first time visiting Northern Michigan, and it has just been so relaxing and cathartic. And I really appreciate all the kindness that you guys have shown me since I've been here. So I appreciate you. Beautiful, beautiful spaces. With that said, Like you said, my name is Tylonn Sawyer. I'm a figurative artist, meaning that I paint and draw the human figure. I've even created a movie before. My work typically in terms of subject matter focuses on the intersection of history, race, politics, pop culture, um, and just literally I smash all those things together depending upon the subject of an individual piece. And that's how I end up coming to an end. My work is usually really heavily researched based just to create what would seem like a simple painting. But I think any time you have a good work of art, it should be multivalent in its meaning and not just be what you see is what you get. There should be some poetry about the content of it. And so that's how I try to approach my work. And so I kind of put together a little slideshow, which kind of gives an overview of my career up to this point. So I'm going to kind of go start with the earliest and then go to the most recent. So blackface. Even though I graduated in 2003, from graduate school, I ended up getting a job in corporate America. So I wasn't making art for like almost 10 years. Like literally I was in the office with like a suit and tie doing papers and things. But it seems weird to say, but I was laid off from my job, and it was one of the best, worst things that ever could have happened to me, because at that point in time, all I had to do was look for a job and paint. But after that, I said to myself, I'm going to commit my life exclusively to being an artist or any type of creative field, and I'm never going back to a job that does not address those skills and talents that I had. And so I started making work, and I ended up getting a single show at this place in Detroit called Cass Cafe. And after that show, I haven't stopped showing since. And so that's been in 2011. And so I started off with this work of like large scale portraits of people of color. I call it blackface just for this context, but I didn't really give the series a name. But I wanted to create these really large, beautiful, bright, intense portraits, which were sort of an inoculation to the way that the media often portrays Black people in terms of like a sort of negative, sort of like violent context. And I wanted to show us really large and beautiful, and really, really kind of show the breadth of what I had learned as a figurative artist up to that point. And so this is a painting. This is called Janus, Part 2. Janus in like Greek mythology is like a god of duality. But this is George Anamdi. He is the gallerist who I show with in Detroit. And I met him early on in my career. I had no idea who he was. He wanted to buy these paintings from me at like a discounted price. And I told him I had like these 2 paintings of my little brother. And I told him, I said, well, if there's nobody buys them before the show ends, I'll sell them to you at the discount. The very next day, a doctor came in, and like I got a call from the place where I was showing that, and they say a doctor just wrote a check and she wants these 2 paintings, and like, so is it okay to sell them to her now? So like, yeah. So I had to call George and tell him like, hey, somebody bought those pictures. And keep in mind, this guy's like one of the biggest gallerists for African American art in the country, and like really known worldwide. I had no idea who he was, and so then he said, yeah, come by the gallery. Like I said, can I get some photos of you? I'd really like to paint you, you know, like you have an interesting face. And I go by his gallery, and it's this huge space. And I'm like, who is this guy? You know, like when I walk in there, and he tells that story too. He's like, this guy had no idea who I was when he met me. And so thank God, like it was a kind, respectful meeting like after that. But this was a painting that I did of him. It's about, I want to say 30 by 45, a little bit over life size. Oil on canvas. These are 2 smaller paintings. These are both 9 by 12. This is called Wonder Boy, and these are portraits of my nephew, Jordan, who, these were done a couple of years ago. He just graduated from high school the other day, so he's a lot bigger than this now. But at this point in time, there was a t-shirt company contacted me in Detroit, and they wanted to do a collaboration, and they had this logo of like a kid with old school fighter pilot helmet on and a pipe in his mouth, which I thought was weird, bless you. And I said, okay. So they let me, I ended up getting an airplane helmet and get a pipe for my nephew, and I dressed him up in these costumes. And I don't know, the collaboration didn't work out, but I really, really enjoyed the portrait because there was just something kind of like interesting about seeing this little guy with like a pipe in his mouth and this really stern look that he had. Because one thing I like that the children in my family, they know that I'm an artist. And so it's not, when it's time to pose or I ask them if I can paint you or draw you, they instantly snap out a little kid mode and they go into this really serious like model mode. And I love that like this is kind of like evidence of that from my nephew. This is my little brother. So these are the portraits that George wanted to buy, and the doctor ended up purchasing. The one I ended up painting one, I want to say in like 2003, approximately 2004, approximately once I graduated from grad school. And then, so this was the one with the eyes on it. And the one with the eyes closed, I never finished it until like 2012. Like I just had it in my studio. And then I went back and finished and showed them both together. But this was a time, I would say probably the last time I really remember my brother being this like innocent. He's 27 now, like to really like think about like how much he's grown. But it was really nice to like capture him at this stage. And once again, you see this type of evidence of like little kids being really serious, when it's time to pose. And I think that's something interesting about like the youth, and we as cute and as innocent as they are, there's a seriousness to them. And as adults, like it's on us to be responsible for that and to acknowledge and teach them. Other two large portraits. This one is called Day Queen. This is my grandmother, and this is called Lady in Red, not Jean Hill. This is Whitney Syphax Walker. These are both pretty large portraits, 5 by 4 feet each, oil on canvas. Okay. And you're gonna see some faces like over and over again. Like you're gonna see my nephew later on, but he's older now, like throughout the years. And you'll see my grandmother in another context. So the Battle of Detroit. So while I was painting those large scale portraits, I ended up getting a residency at this, there was a residency in Detroit for a few years called the Red Bull House of Art, where the company that makes the energy drink Red Bull actually bought a building in Eastern Market and created this really, really like hip, trendy sort of residency. And they would bring in 8 artists and give you this outrageous budget and just tell you to make art for 3 months. And then they would put on a show and give you a show that would run for 3 months while the next cycle came in, and it would just keep being filtered through there. But at this time I did the series of like 12 works of art, all involving like gas masks or sort of like war regalia. And it was called A Battle of Detroit, not so much in a physical battle where people are on the streets with guns like what's happening in the Ukraine, but more or less like a psychological battle. Because around that time, Detroit was going through all these struggles with the financial crisis and, being in risk of being put under an emergency financial manager. And they were thinking about taking art from the DIA. And it was just all these struggles that we were going through as a city. And being a human and just being out in the world, I also had some challenges. And I was thinking about this idea, like the mask is sort of a metaphor to protect oneself from like toxic environments, or these sort of like things that come to you and try to always in opposition to like what would be best for you. And so that's sort of like the imagery that came out from that. These are my nephew again, but he has the gas mask on, so he's a little bit older here. But both of these are 30 by 40 oil on canvas. And I wanted to paint them sort of in a Caravaggio Baroque style, where it's sort of like these figures emerging from the shadows, like using the chiaroscuro. Black and blue. So this is both old, it's a continuous series. Like I'll do these drawings every couple of years. And so I do these series of like large scale drawings, which sort of investigates or interrogates law enforcement. So as I was doing the portraits for the blackface portraits, I wanted my work to have a bit more impact, because even while I was painting these really, really beautiful portraits, you were getting these really, really high profile cases of Black people being killed by police, and then just all this type of brutality. And I was thinking about like throughout that process of us seeing this over and over again, the reputation of law enforcement is just starting to disintegrate, especially since you don't hear a lot of dissenting voices in law enforcement pushing back against, like those particular narratives, or calling out their coworkers on the deeds that they do. And so this is a drawing I did. This is called Class of 2016 Cabal. And this is 5 by 8 feet, charcoal and acrylic on paper. And so I spent like a whole month drawing all of these cops. And I did the faces in like great detail. When I was done with it, it just seemed too much like an illustration to me. Like it didn't articulate the concept. It was almost as if, I don't know, I was just literally copying this police academy photo, and it wasn't quite translating the context or the meaning that I wanted to. And so I just took a risk and took acrylic paint and like whited out one of the faces, and I liked the drips, and I'm like, thank God that worked, because that would have been terrible, that would have been terrible to do that drawing and then just have it ruined. And I just kind of kept at it. When I was done, there was something even about the redacting of like the images of the faces away, because even though this is law enforcement, there was a really, really diverse group of people in here, male, female, Black, white, Latino, Asian, it didn't matter. But by whiting out the faces, you tend to think of law enforcement as a singular, sort of like organism, and that's why I was thinking about like, well, it's not so much as that this is a Black cop or a white cop. Everybody, if they're law enforcement, they're blue, and this is the way that they see things. And so the acrylic paint dripping down, kind of making it as if the flesh is dissipating. This isn't an overt anti-law enforcement sort of image, but it is to talk about how the reputation of law enforcement is starting to dissipate because we start to see all these incidences over and over again. And it's pretty challenging to, like sort of like talk against when we see you beating or killing someone on tape. So that one was called Class of 2016. This was called Every Now and Then, and there was a show commemorating the '67 rebellion in Detroit, the riots that went down. And so this was an image where a friend of mine was in New York, and at the time they were having, I don't know what type of protests at that time, because they just were going over and over again. But my friend took a really candid photo like while he was there, and I asked him if I could use it as a reference for the image. And so I did this one, and I like the way that the cops seem very chaotic and they're moving around, but the crowd is really stable, like in the background, and kind of forms this wall. And you see like, once again, like the cops are starting to dissipate. And this is 5 by 7 feet charcoal and acrylic on paper. So large again. And then in November, I did this one. So this is called Descent, and this is 5 by 8 feet charcoal and acrylic on paper. And so this one I did, like shortly after the Supreme Court made its decision to repeal Roe versus Wade. And again, thinking about, when I was thinking about Black and Blue, this was an institutional law enforcement, but now I'm going to kind of expand it to just think about the justice system as a whole and the ways that it fails its citizens. And so like really thinking about how disappointed I was in this particular institution for doing this, because it's like one of the first times we can think of where the Supreme Court actually took rights away from people, and rather than give them away. And I just thought, for me, that was pretty shameful. Same materials, charcoal and acrylic on paper. Cool. So American Gods. So this was, I'm doing Black and Blue, and I was still painting those other portraits simultaneously. Then I was coming up on the next solo show. And so I created this show where I started to research Americana or famous like American images. And I was thinking about, there's this book called American Gods by one of my favorite writers, Neil Gaiman. And American Gods, it's a fiction book about where when people started to colonize the Americas, they would come from different countries, and different countries have different belief systems, different gods. And these people would come here and they would bring their gods with them. But as time went on and America became more secular, people sort of forgot their gods, and their gods kind of would still be alive, wandering the streets, not as powerful as they used to be because people don't pray, but nevertheless, this whole narrative kind of unfolds in that context. And so I was thinking about the way that in that book, in this fictional book where gods were involuntarily brought to the United States and then sort of like left to make it on their own, I was thinking about how Black people were involuntarily brought to the United States, and then post-Civil War, post-Reconstruction, and what's going on, what it's like to have the identity of an American in a context where that wasn't one that you necessarily chose. And now that you are an American, the life that you have to fight for like all those rights that come with that particular title. So this is called Pietà. This is 6 by 4 feet oil on canvas. And I based it off of the Pietà. It means pity in Italian, and it's one of the 3 images that you'll ever find in Christian art of the Virgin Mary being sad. I mean, it's usually, if you ever hear the term Pietà, it's usually gonna be a woman holding a man, or somebody holding each other, like as if they come down, because the actual Pietà is an image of Mary holding Jesus after he's been deposed from the cross. And so this one I started using for this particular series. I used the American flag and sort of to kind of create these sort of complicated American portraits. And so this is my friend and her actual son. And I talked about them with the painting, and I actually, when she posed for this, and she's like, well, you have to ask my son. And so I had to explain to this 11-year-old, like this, what this painting was about and what this was going to do, because I wanted to make it a painting that addressed gun violence against little Black boys, but I didn't want it to be overtly violent. I didn't want to have blood. I didn't want there to be dead bodies. Like even the way he's laying out, it's a sort of ambiguity. It's not like death, but if you're familiar with the Pietà image, you'll know what this is. And so I just put him in a black hoodie, kind of reminiscent of Trayvon Martin, who is I know if you guys are familiar, 12-year boy who was killed a few years ago through vigilante, state-sanctioned sort of vigilante violence. And so he's dressed in a black hoodie, sort of reminiscent of that. And she kind of has this sort of like white robe on, like to kind of think about purity or this sort of apotheosis. But at the end of the day, it's a mother holding her son, and it's like, you don't know if he's dead, you don't know if he's asleep or not. But it's almost like she's presenting him to us, and this is the sacrifice that mothers make to America to be this way, particularly like Black mothers. Same model, it's like you're going to see same faces over and over again. So these two paintings are sort of companion pieces. This is called Columbia American Woman, and this is Uncle Sam. And so this is me taking popular American images. Columbia isn't as popular anymore. Apparently at the beginning of the, it says post the Revolutionary War, when the United States started to develop its own national identity, you would have Columbia as a really prominent image that you would see of this sort of like blonde white woman with a sort of like Greek toga on and a torch, and she was supposed to be representative of like freedom and supposed to help the poor and the wanted. The Statue of Liberty is a version of Columbia, but in 1942, when Columbia Pictures appropriated the images for like their opening title sequences, it became so popular in that context that people forgot that this had anything to do with America, like at all. And so, but I'd like the spirit of what Columbia represented is it's this woman who is to protect like people and be strong. And so it's like, let me put like a Black woman with a baseball bat in front of an American flag, and I think she could protect me from like, like any dangers that may come. But at the same time, is she protecting the flag? Is she going to protect you? It's asking all of these types of questions, because once you take an American icon and you put a Black person in that particular context, it complicates the reading a bit more. Uncle Sam, this is me taking from the traditional image created by JM Flag, of the Uncle Sam with the old white guy with the beard saying, "I want you." But what do you do when you have like a good looking Black man with a joint in his hand and a pistol, and he's saying, "I want you too," right? And it raises these questions about how Black bodies can be sexualized and things like that. But nevertheless, or even thinking about violence, where America, we're all about guns, but like when you see a Black person with a gun, what type of read is that, right? So,
Question is, Columbia, is that a noose around your neck?
No, it's a chain, just a gold chain.
Just a chain? Oh, it's a chain.
Yeah,
I thought it was-
I would never.
No.
No. And both of these are 5 by 4 feet oil on canvas. This is 3 Graces Aretha Franklin. This is 6 by 7 feet oil and glitter on canvas. And so sometimes in some of my work, you'll see this trope where I have these sort of like paper masks and people have them covered over their faces. There's this trope that I use in my work where I use these type of masks. In certain sub-Saharan African tribes, they will use masks as ways to like connect with the spirit world. And so they may have like a ceremony, somebody in the tribe may put on a mask that represents an ancestor or a local animal spirit. And throughout this ceremony of this process, the person who's wearing the mask becomes imbued with that spirit, and then the tribe is able to commune with them to get advice or to know what's going on in the spirit world. And so I was thinking about, what if contemporary African Americans, what if we had something similar? And so I kind of created this sort of like paper mask trope, and I would use it to sort of represent the ideas of certain individuals rather than them be overt portraits of them. And so this was a painting I did kind of shortly after Aretha Franklin passed away. And that's why I call it 3 Graces. I've done the 3 Graces thing. I did Nina Simone, and I did Nina Simone twice. But this is the first time I'm doing it like Aretha Franklin. It's thinking about her being like such an American icon. Realistically, this painting was only created, this famous chef, Marcus Samuelson, was commissioning me. He said he wanted this painting of like Aretha Franklin done in the style like that I do, or whatever. And he was going to open up this big restaurant in Detroit. Whatever happened, the restaurant deal fell through, and I had started the painting and I just finished, and it's like, I'm just going to keep it myself, and do it that way because it fit within the context of my work. But this is like Aretha Franklin, 3 stages in her life. And no matter what stage she was in, she was always the queen of soul in that way. But like I said, this is oil and glitter on canvas. So like the bodies and the black in the back of the flag, that's all oil, but as well as the mask, but then there's glitter in the stars and then the stripes. And then there's really, really fine glitter that I put in the drapery, like while it was still wet. So if you see the painting in person, it like has this kind of like pearl sort of like sparkle throughout the whole thing. Because even though I try to go into this deep, heavy, like sort of political and social context, I still like things to be pretty sometimes, you know, so. White History Month. So I did a residency at the University of Michigan where I sort of created these works based off of historical moments, which principally involve white people, okay? So when I called it White History Month, everybody, like there was like this controversy because people thought I was gonna be doing things about the Ku Klux Klan and all this violence. I'm like, it's not the type of artist I am, okay? I'm witty, I may make you think something like that's coming, but that's not where I choose to go, like when I show my work. But these two paintings here, and White History Month happened in 2 volumes. So here I'm sort of like connecting both of them together. These 2 paintings, this is called Good Government and Bad Government. Both of these are 5 by 8 feet oil and collage on canvas. And so all of the figures are painted with oil, and then every little bit of negative space that's in there has a collage image from a news story that was happening at the time that I painted these pictures. I kind of call them these sort of up to the date paintings. The titles come from there's these murals by Antonio Lorenzetti called The Allegory of Good and Bad Government, and it's in a Byzantine, I forget what you call it, like a Roman government building. But they had these murals up so that when people would come in, into this municipal building, so that when the magistrates and the senators and the people who make decisions for the community would be around the table making decisions, they would have these murals around to show them. An allegory of good government would show everything being nice. People are working, they're tending the fields, there were maidens dancing. Allegory of bad government, there was drought, there was the devil in there. It was just like all of this violence. But they had these murals put in this context where decision makers were to tell them basically make good choices, because if you don't, this is what the consequences could be. And so I was thinking about the United States. I want to create these paintings sort of like tongue in cheek, like, well, what does that look like, good government or bad government in the United States? And so the images that are in between the negative space, it happens from both Democratic and Republican governments. And you still see that there's chaos no matter who's in power in the United States. And actually at the time these were done, I finished these like, maybe like a week or 2 after the January 6th attacks that happened there. And so like in there, you can see some of the protests of like the figures that were in there. And when I showed these paintings, people were like, didn't that just happen last week? You know, and I was like, yeah, you know. And so it was this really, really like sort of up to the date sort of context. But like I say, it's being witty in a way to saying like good government, bad government, it doesn't matter. We're in the thick of it, no matter who's in power. This is called White on White Stone Mountain. This is 6 by 14 feet, oil on canvas. And this is in a collection of the DIA. This is an image based off Stone Mountain, Georgia. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. In Stone Mountain, Georgia, there's a huge mountain called Stone Mountain with the world's largest bas-relief on it, which is a tribute to the Confederacy with Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and Jefferson Davis. And so like this actual mural bas-relief is the largest one in the world. It's so big, think of the context of one of us, we could fit in the nostril. That's how big the actual bas-relief, yeah, like it's gigantic. But to think like this is a large tribute to the Confederacy, right? Like an organization which tried to basically take over the United States and preserve slavery. Stone Mountain is the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. And it's still considered a sacred spot to them. Like they still hold ceremonies there, even though it is Georgia's top tourist attraction. But this was painted at a time where in the media, they were having all these calls to remove Confederate monuments from around the country. And that made me think about this one being the largest Confederate monument in the world, not just in the United States. And because it's so big and it's on the side of a mountain, I kind of changed the perspective where you sort of have these figures tossing and turning, laying on top of it, not to mention they're larger, so there's a distortion in scale. But overall, the picture is kind of like these people are laying on a bed of racism and being restless. And it kind of speaks to this context of being Black and constantly being reminded of this type of past, or something happens like every day that will remind you, you know, like that you're Black. You don't just get to go out and be in that way. And so this is me kind of what this painting is sort of a commentary on. And I also think it's ironic because I'm like, if you knew the time, like researching this, it took them like this was painted after the Civil War, and it was finished, completed in the early 70s. That's how long they went through 3 different artists. And the only reason it stalled is because they didn't have the technology to fully implement it until around the late 60s with this type of torch. Yeah.
I just want to say, while it's up,
Mhm.
I teach at the DIA,
Mhm.
and we have a new program called Color in Art, and we use this painting all the time.
Oh, nice.
With high schoolers to look at, talk about the layered issues involved. So.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. But like, I was like, just the time, money, and attention that went into the world's largest second place trophy. It's weird to me. Like, it just is. Right? These 2 portraits, these are 30 by 40, pardon my French, but the language, these paintings are called Your Founding Fathers Owned Slaves and We Ain't Forgot That Shit, part 1 and part 2. And it's about this ideal of like our founding fathers who are lauded with such authority, but these were 2 of the biggest slaveholders like at the time, Thomas Jefferson. And there's actually a big story about Thomas Jefferson in terms of like his mistress, Sally Hemings, and the Charles H. Wright Museum had a entire exhibition like based off of that context. And then George Washington, how the most popular Black name in America is Washington, and how many Black people can trace their lineage back to him, you know, in that particular context. And so I thought it would be interesting to have a Black woman like paint them in a way, like to do that painting. And I was gonna kind of make it silly, like put mustaches on them or distort their face in a way. But I said, but I think psychologically it would have more impact if this Black woman's kind of trying to do an accurate study of these men. And it kind of challenges the viewer to do the same thing as well.
Kind of a question about the previous picture at the top. Those just holders of the, there's any significance to the, at the top of the picture?
What do you mean? Like the,
I thought it's just holding the picture.
that's just the easel.
They're just holding it.
Yes, it's on the easel. This is funny because this, you can see the ledge of the easel. So it's like the painting of the easel. It's meta. It's very weird. It's very meta.
So
Yeah.
it's realism, it's not symbolism or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the paintbrush that doesn't feel like she's a real paintbrush?
She's using a fan brush.
It's strong.
Yeah.
It feels stronger like a camera.
I find your interpretation quite interesting. Anyway, cool. This is one, I did these drawings called strata drawings where I usually investigate different points in history and I do these sort of like layered drawings. I didn't include the other ones, but this is the 3rd one I did. This is called Strata Drawing 3, Pangea. The woman, the new woman that you see here, this is a drawing of a woman named Sarah Bartman, who in the late 1800s, she was sold into slavery throughout Europe. And she comes from a tribe that has, I forget the name of the condition, it escapes me, but it causes them to have really large butts and like really inflamed sort of like vulvas. And it's really specific to this tribe, like this particular condition. But when she was sold into slavery, she was sent around Europe sort of in like a freak show. And put on to display and sort of like ridiculed and like used as entertainment for the wealthy. But when and she had a really tragic life because once she got old, I think she was sold into like prostitution and she just ended up dying that way. And they actually still have her body preserved there, like taxidermy, like in Europe, like this is an actual thing. But the irony is, so I was thinking, you think about her body, but in European fashion, while she was considered sort of like something to ridicule, in European fashion, you started to see these dresses develop with these really thin waistlines and these really huge bodices that women would just wear out casually. And this started to spread. And I was thinking, I was kind of looking at the research and this happened around the same time. And so you don't have any documentation that says overtly that this woman's body type affected this type of dress, but it's sort of like, this is the thing that was on Instagram and Twitter and everything back in the day. And so it's kind of a weird coincidence that these dresses of this form is starting to come and duplicate this thing that you guys are starting to ridicule. And so that's why I call the image Pangea, because how Pangea was the super continent. It's theoretical. None of us were here, but we can assume that because if you look at the continents, the land masses now that they have used to fit together into some type of super landmass. So I'm thinking about the context of this woman and this type being in Europe and going around and being really, really popular, sort of like the connection between that and how European fashion started to echo her body. And so that's why it's called Pangea. And this is red chalk, charcoal, and green pastel. And so like red, black, and green is a nod to Pan-Africanism, and that's why I did those particular colors. And this is 6 by 4 feet. So I'm only 5'10", so to give you a sense of like, it's a bigger, this is actually probably like the actual life size of the drawing, now that I'm looking at it. A different world. So this is the most recent thing I've done. I just, it's actually still up in Detroit right now at Anamdi Gallery, but to show a different world. I had got to, I don't know, stressed out by politics because of like the contention and the going back and forth. And then we were coming out of the pandemic and the January 6th riot, and I was just exhausted with politics for a while, even though it's impossible for me to completely escape it. But I wanted to kind of create work from a place of joy rather than constantly being upset by like the latest news story. And so I just decided to do this series of like large scale drawings that were built off of joy and kind of used this sort of Afrofuturist trope. Afrofuturism is this concept of like, I mean, it's really complex, but think about like Blackness in the future or like magical or just beyond, you know, a type of social political context that we tend to think of work. And so I kind of created these images based off of that. This drawing is called, for small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. And that's a quote by Carl Sagan talking about space exploration. And it, like, as humans, as we go out, to not treat space so much like just another place to colonize, but more or less go out to discover and learn. And if we do find worlds that we can colonize, to make the best of them in a way. And so this is my friend Scheherazade, and this is the same you've seen, she's probably see her more often than like the same model, like over and over again. But thinking about her as being like one of the kindest and like somebody I'm really, really, you know, like just really, really close to, and like her beauty and like her strength. And so I just kind of combined her image with Velázquez's Infantana Maria Teresa. And I kind of put these images together, and in the background, like where you kind of see the stars in space, that's all charcoal. And so it's kind of even a metaphor for actually creating space, you know, like for like Black women or beauty. I put this triangle there because the triangle is considered the strongest shape, you know, like to hold up structurally, but it's made out of flowers. And so it kind of is giving this both strength and sort of like delicate nature as well. And then there are actual pearls glued to the front of the drawing. So it kind of has this 3-dimensional tactile sort of feel to it. And this is charcoal, pastel, collage, and pearls, all on paper. And this is 5 by 4 feet. It's pretty large. It's just like a flower brooch that was on the dress. Yeah. So this is another picture of my grandmother. This one is called Matriarch. This is 5 by 4 feet, charcoal and collage on canvas. I wanted to do another image of my grandmother, but I didn't want to do a traditional portrait. A lot of times you see portraits of like elderly people, they're in chairs and it's kind of like blankets over them, and it kind of looks like, I think about this painting of Whistler's mother sitting in this rocking chair and it's in profile. And I wanted to kind of, my grandmother, you saw her in Day Queen, even then she had this bright orange shirt on, her hair was done in a certain way. That's not who she is, like as a person. And so I wanted to kind of create this Afrofuturist portrait of like my grandmother, where her kids are sort of metaphorically, you know, like kind of rotate around her. And then in a garment, I actually went to her house through the photo album and just took like copied like images of like all of our immediate family and sort of like made a garment to where she sort of like wears her family with her. And then she's kind of has her hand on the American flag to give a nod back to that American gods sort of.
Which one are you?
Me, I am, where am I at? That's me. And there's another one. She's holding me, and that's me. So that's her when she was like in her 30s, like holding me when I was little. Yeah. That's her. This is my mother and my aunt. This is my grandfather. This is my little brother, my sister. This is my grandmother's mother, great grandmother, uncles, aunts, my cousins, my uncles, children. Yeah, so it's literally like the immediate family, like all on there. Yeah. Cool. Yikes, go back. This is called Black Man on Horse. Pretty, pretty self-explanatory. The actual image itself is probably just a little bit bigger than this. It's like 9 by 16 feet or so. So it's about as big as the actual like entire screen. And this is charcoal and glitter on paper. I wanted to do an image of a Black man on a horse, which sort of represents social mobility in a way, because horses, they represent that in certain mythologies, particularly even in Christianity, where it's not necessarily saying like death on a pale horse, but horses thinking about a transition from one stage to another. And when you think about society, horses are sort of represent a type of like power or a type of strength in that way. And so I wanted to create an image sort of like that. And even though I am the man who's on the horse, it's not overtly me. It's just I needed a model and I was available at the time, to do this. And so that's why that happened. But, and then just kind of put into this large sphere with all of this glitter. If you saw how much glitter was in my studio after like doing this, there's still glitter in there somewhere, I'm telling you. But to sort of just like look at this vastness. And again, it's thinking about this concept of creating space, like in a way. These were 2 self-portraits that I did, Moonlight 1 and Moonlight 2. These are like the first portraits I did, self-portraits I did in almost 10 years. And so it was kind of like more or less like recording myself for the man that I have become right now, particularly in the first one. And then this is charcoal and gold leaf. So the moon is kind of made with gold leaf on there. And then the other one is acrylic and glitter. And so like this one kind of speaks just more or less objectively sort of to the man I've become. Moonlight 2, we're sort of thinking about, there's this concept in movies and you hear it in concept called the magic Negro, where it's like the Black person is the one who is responsible for absolving whoever the white protagonist is of whatever thing it is that they've done that stops them from moving on. And I often think about that being the only Black person in almost any institution I've ever worked in. Like I teach at Oakland Community College. I'm the only Black person in the art department whatsoever. When I worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art, when I first got there, I was the only Black person who wasn't like working at a desk job. I mean, like working at visitor services. Like I was the only person involved in programming. When I taught at the College for Creative Studies, I was the only Black person there. When I taught, and literally, when I was the only Black person in my graduate school, graduating class. And the class under me, there was only one Black person in their class, okay? And so like, it's just a thing that I tend to think about, and then like, these would be the things they always want to take pictures of you. Like, see, we have diversity, It's like, not really, no. So that's kind of what that idea is. Hey, I wouldn't say I think that's a failure on people. Like, I think affirmative action could work, but like when people just don't think to be inclusive, and I say this because when I worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art, weird departure, and I'll come back to this. When I worked at the Museum of Contemporary Art, I created the first Teen Arts Council in Michigan, which is still going today, where you would bring in teenagers from diverse backgrounds, put them together, and we would pay them to create programming for other teenagers, like in the Tri-County area. And, yes, the DIA replicated my idea, the thing that I did there. But when I put it together, I remember I was up to like almost 4 a.m. trying to put together a diverse group of like young people. And so thinking about race, thinking about, socioeconomic background, sexuality, this, that, and the other. And I think of the headache it gave me. But when I did it, it was like how amazing these young people were and how they got to know each other and to see like that sort of synergy that happened when this kind of diversity got into a room and they had to like work together to create something for the greater good. And I think that's the strength of the program and why it's still going. And I know that I did good work when I did that. And I wish people and institutions thought the same way. Like, it's not just, oh, because we need to match these numbers and this says that we have met our diversity quota. Like, no, really think about it, really care about that, because I even turned down jobs for this guy who wanted to put on the event and it was supposed to be strictly for Black people. And I'm like, we can't do that. And it's like, well, why? Our people need this and our people need that. I said, I feel you, but that is not what this program is about. Like, if you can open it up to other people, like we can. And so I think people need that like should just have that type of tenacity when they go into it. Last thing I'll show is like murals. I kind of inadvertently became a muralist. That was not my goal when I started painting. But like around 2007, they opened up a Whole Foods in Detroit, and they had this call contest for people they were going to do 4 murals on the back. And so they would pick 4 artists, and my friends' family kept sending me this prospectus, and I was like, I don't paint murals, and I just kept ignoring it. And then finally my cousin sent it, and I almost screamed at my desk, and I was like, all right, God damn it, I'll do it, And so I did this like really quick application, sent in a sketch and sent it in, and I made it to like the 2nd round, and I was just like, what? And so I did like a much more, like I started to do research on how to do mural presentations. I put together a presentation on how I wanted it, researched the logistics of it, put together this sort of like setup. And then there's this thing called Noel Night, like around Christmas in Detroit, basically a big winter festival. And then the public got to judge who the next round, and I made it to the final round. And then I had to go into like this room with all these like planners and city people and, like talk up this mural. And I was one of the 4 artists they picked. And it just blew my mind because I'd never painted a mural in my life. So thank God for books in the library. But this was, so this was the first mural I ever did. This is called Spirit of Detroit Remix. If you've ever seen the Spirit of Detroit, Marshall Fredericks, downtown Detroit, it's that pose. And so this is my friend's son, another person who just graduated from high school, but, like I wanted him, like kind of in the spirit of Detroit, and then it's Whole Foods. And so this is an actual topographical view where that field is. That's where the Whole Foods is now. But at the time I was painting this, it was just being built. So it's like, it's still kind of giving, sort of like props to the history of this place. But then we eat fruits and vegetables because it's Whole Foods. So it's just kind of like about that. But this is 13 feet by 23 feet, I believe. Okay, yeah.
Are the murals on the wall beside that, or this?
Yeah. So it's like 4. I'm only going to show you mine though. Like, yeah, I'm going to show you though. But it's cool. Each one of these individual like panels, like they were all split that way. And so I had to rent a studio and paint this in there. And once again, like I said, so each one of these is like 6.5 feet tall and 70 pounds, and I'm 5'10". So you just saw me like moving these things in there and having to paint them like on each side. Yeah.
So what is the substrate? What were you painting?
Mapes Coralite panels. It's like metal. It's like a thin aluminum with this really, really strong like foam in it. I want to get some of that stuff more. I need to paint on it though. It felt really cool, like when you draw or like paint on top of it. But so this was the first mural I did, and I was like, yay. And then once I painted this, I never had to go for another mural job. People only like contacted me to like do them. This was a mural I did at the University of Michigan when I was there for the residency, called First Man Samuel Coles Watson. He was the first Black student to attend the University of Michigan in the late 1800s. But the irony is, while he was there, he was so fair-skinned, he passed for white. So in a weird way, he was not the first Black student who attended the University of Michigan. And then he has the mask on. So I kind of did that from an image that was in their archive because I did this research while I was there. But they put out a story in the paper because of this mural. And then somebody in Virginia recognized this photo and contacted U of M and told them that they had it mislabeled who this picture was because it was somebody from there, and they didn't even know how it got in their archives. And so I thought it was ironic. It's like, man, I painted a mural of the wrong person. But in a weird way, because it's a mask, I like that it goes to the meaning of like who Samuel Coles Watson is, like, and like we have no image of what he looked like. Like there's no image like I've been able to find, like not in Wayne State's libraries, University of Michigan didn't have it. And I thought it was really ironic. So yeah. And it's like 10 by 16 feet. Acrylic and glitter, so like all the black, like once it was done, I had to like do this project with the students at U of M. You should have saw, okay, now let's put a bunch of glitter on it, and do this. So when you walk down the hallway, it'll kind of like sparkle or look like this sort of fantastical thing. Yeah. The Modern Languages building.
I don't want to go into forbidden territory, but do you have any critiques or questions about his right hand, middle finger looking phallic? The right hand.
I think that's more of a question as to why it looks valid to you.
No, but I'm just wondering if anybody wondered if there was any hidden meetings there.
You?
It's not me, of course, no.
I assure you, no one's ever said something like that. So no. This mural is actually in my neighborhood. That's my old car to get a sense of context for like how large it is. But these two, they're adults now. They were adults then, but they were teenagers. When I did the teen council, they used to be some of my teens. And when I got the commission to do this mural, I called them up and said, hey, can I pay you to take pictures of you and paint you in a mural? And they said, yeah. And so I painted Chase and Asia really high up. This is weird because it's like, this is really high up and it doesn't look that high from here. But when you're up on the scaffold, like up in the air, it's like, man, this is tall. But I like this is in my neighborhood where however you enter it, no matter what direction come in, you're going to see beautiful smiling Black people like in that space. And that's why I created this and wanted it to come off that way. And it's up really, really high so like people can just see it because it's like a really kind of like complicated like intersection where a lot of people will see it simultaneously. I don't know if the building has a name. There's an organization that is in it because this was for, they did this, they call like City Walls now, but I forgot what the name of the program was then in Detroit, where they paid artists to paint murals on certain local businesses, from there. This is, so this is called We Hope for Better Things. This is my nephew again, the one who had who was like with the airplane mask on and then the gas mask. So this is like the oldest, like I've painting him, but this is him and my sister Bree. My niece passed away from cancer 2 years ago. And at the time I painted this, this was a few years, she had just gone into remission for her cancer and like we were so happy. And so when I ended up getting this commission, I painted it for as like sort of like a celebratory mural, for her going into remission, her and her brother, and it's called We Hope for Better Things. And it sucks. As soon as I was done painting this, I want to say like 3 weeks afterwards, like she got sick again and went back in. And then she passed away 2 years like after that. So originally it started off as something celebratory, but then kind of became a commemorative piece like afterwards. But it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, like that I've actually like created. And I love that her friend, because like she would have graduated from high school last year. But like her friends and stuff, like every once in a while I'll get like posts of like tags on Instagram and her friends still go to this and like take pictures of her themselves like next to her and things like that. And where this is at a business, I like that it's at an awning. So like the weather doesn't damage it and it still looks as good today as it did like when I painted it. So that is that.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us more about the halos, the gold halos, the link to the iconic images, religious images?
You just did. That's exactly what it's about. I'm not being cryptic here. I just wanted to kind of show like my niece and nephew and these sort of like angelic, sort of like heavenly figures. And I'm just using like Christian tropes, like the gold halos to do that. That's all.
How do you prep the surface before you paint it?
They paint that for me before I get there. They'll just ask you like, what color do you want the wall to be? And then they'll do it. They call it buffing the wall. Is this the last one? I think it is. Yeah, that's my last slide. So everyone, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, any questions? You've been asking, this is really entertaining. Thank you guys so much. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I was at the Toledo Art Museum. Was that your big guy on a horse?
No, I've never shown anything at Toledo. Maybe Kehinde Wiley. Yeah.
At your open studio at the Park Residency on Saturday, we have an opportunity. That's what there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have like a few drawings. I've been doing a lot of research, and then I just started working on this durational project. You'll see like some of them. I mean, it's not surprising or anything. So if you're familiar with the Pulse nightclub shooting that took place in Florida a couple of years ago, where 49 people were killed in this club in this sort of anti-gay attack. And so I'm doing this series. I'm gonna draw all 49 of like the victims on that. And I'm doing them all in different colors, sort of like reminiscent of the LGBT flag. So finding good pictures and researching and getting to learn about them, that's kind of what I've been doing since I've gotten here. And I've noticed like the work that I've been, or the research that I've kind of been doing on since I've gotten here, it's kind of focused from an LGBT kind of historical perspective. It's still in the context sort of my work, but like I found research on like the first drag queen, which was a former slave, which blew my mind. And so, yeah, we'll see. That's one of the reasons I am really enjoying my time here is because it's quiet and I get to do that research and I don't have the distractions of like the world around me. So, yeah, so you'll see it come through. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, actually, a couple of weeks ago, well, I painted last year, but it was the unveiling was 2 weeks ago, not even 2 weeks really. I painted the dean of the College of Engineering for the University of Michigan. And I finished it last year, I had to keep it quiet until it was supposed to be when he retired, but he ended up getting a job becoming the provost of Duke. So he's gonna, yeah, I was like, what a job, you know? That was really cool. Like I got to go to the unveiling like ceremony there. It's rare when I do a commission though. Like usually it's something kind of prestigious like that, only because doing commissions, I would say just for private citizens, it's just a pain. A lot of times people don't know exactly what they want. And so you might start it and they go, oh, no, not like that. Well, what about this thing? Or I don't know. U of M actually did that. Like for his port, I painted him 4 or 5 times. But here's the thing, they paid me each time I started over. And so I'm like, okay, Yeah, like, and because they acknowledged that they kept changing. Like, well, what if we do it this one? And that's gonna, yeah, and they just, so that's weird, but yeah.
I was late because of a last rerouting, but did you already talk about where your gift came from?
Well, I mean, both my parents can draw really well. My mother, I haven't seen her draw in years. When I was growing up, she was sort of drew in this very illustrative style, like she could draw cartoons really well. And the old TV Guide, when they used to come out, she would draw like all over the pages, like once it's like past the date of this show. So by the time you get to an older, like a TV Guide that's old, it's like literally she would have drawn over like the entire like book. And it'll be like outer space and how she'll make things, like how she would play with the composition and things. And then my father owns like race cars and show cars. And so he taught himself how to draw in that design style so that he can create his race cars or just design show cars and help other people in that way. So I saw that, but education too. I have a good education. I went to, like I said, Eastern Michigan. I had great teachers. The New York Academy of Art was an amazing school to go to. I studied at the Royal Academy of Art in London while I was in graduate school. So that was, yeah. So there's that. Thanks. Anyone else? Right.
Signal, it looks like we're at
All
time,
right.
so thanks so much.
Thank you so much, everybody.